Some of the most important depth on the Houston Texans and a potential difference maker for the defense that wasn't available last year. That and so much more as the wheel keeps spinning and the training camp preview rolls on. Presented by my friends at DraftKits.co. Take your draft to the next level, the customizable, reusable draft board from my friends at DraftKits.co. Use that code Cody25. Get 10% off your entire order. Check out the link in the description down below. Let's get the wheel spinning. We're at the mercy of the wheel. Who will we talk about? Who is first up on the video today? How about linebacker Jake Hansen bringing it to the table? Now, Hansen was a player that when he first got to the league, undrafted free agent, played linebacker for Lovie Smith at Illinois, and I didn't really think much of Jake Hansen being around the team. And then Jake Hansen made the team, and then he made the team again. And then Jake Hansen kept making the team. The Houston Texans brought Hansen back this past offseason. He's a factor in that linebacker room and on special teams. That's what Hansen brings to the table for this Texans team. If you remember, he and Neville Hewitt got called upon a couple of times in the depth portion of the season at linebacker. And look, Hansen is a fine player. He's had some really solid moments for this Texans team. He's had some impressive special teams moments. He's a solid player that you could trust on special teams. I just don't know how much you want to put him out there on the field and how much this version of the Texans will even give him a chance to be on the field. You think about the players that are ahead of him on the depth chart in Azeez Al-Shire, Henry To'o, Christian Harris, obviously the bringing in of EJ Speed and Nick Neiman. Those are two players with more playing experience and special teams experience and success than Hansen. It's a long climb onto this roster for Jake Hansen. But I've been counting him out since he got to the National Football League. So why stop counting him, or why count him in now? Because that might be bad mojo for him. So I'm going to count him out again, and then hopefully he'll prove me wrong again. And then Jake Hansen's on this roster again, if the trend stays steady. But he's a solid player, and could I see him as the 53rd guy to make the roster, the 52nd guy to make the roster, and just a depth piece there in the linebacker room? Again, how they construct the offense is also going to determine how the defense is constructed, because if you keep a certain number of players over here on offense that do this on special teams, you need to adjust for the numbers on defense. And then the defense is where you have a lot of those special teams bodies, kickoff coverage, punt coverage, Hansen being a factor on those if he makes the team and he plays special teams. So that's Jake Hansen's role. Can't see him playing defense too terribly much if all these other backups work out. Who's next? Pre-training camp preview selector wheel. What do you have for us? Derek Barnett. And I love Derek Barnett's situation with this Texans team, and I love what he brings to the table. Now, Barnett was deployed in a pretty limited manner over the course of the season, even though he's sort of the first body that comes off of the bench when Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson take a breather. He still didn't have a tremendous amount of snaps compared to some other backups across the league. Now, those backups sometimes spend time as a starter because the guys in front of them are hurt for long stretches, but I digress. Barnett is the third defensive end effectively on this team, and man, he had some standout moments last year. You think about the 2 scores that Barnett had on defense, and then also just the consistency that he brought to the table. Pro Football Focus loved Derek Barnett last year and some of the stats that he brought to the table. And though he didn't have astronomical sack numbers, he's a guy that the Texans, trust in this defense. And when you put him on the field, more often than not, he gets the job done at defensive end. Are there some challengers for Derek Barnett's spot? Absolutely. A healthy Dylan Horton, Darrell Taylor, a free agent that the Texans brought over from the Chicago Bears. Those guys could be challenging Derek Barnett, but I like this veteran to still keep his spot as that third defensive end, as that first body off the bench when the Texans do that rotation along their defensive line. It is tough to find good help at defensive end in the National Football League. Some guys are just too old and they don't have any juice to them. Some guys are too young and they don't know what to do at the position, and there's too much learning that they have to do. Barnett strikes a nice medium between them. He's not old, but he's been around the league for a while, and he knows what he can and he knows what he can't do, and he does a lot more what he can do, and the Texans don't put him in positions where he can't succeed. A really solid backup for this Houston Texans team. And when you think about, I'm just thinking about some of these other teams across the NFL, I'm sure Barnett could start for some of these teams, and I know he's better than some third defensive ends across the league. A nice solid backup for the Texans. What does the wheel have for us next after Jake Hansen and Derek Barnett? Well, not a lot of time needs to be spent on this one. Graham Mertz, the fourth-string quarterback right now. And Mertz may not even be able to practice at training camp. We'll find out when training camp gets here. But he tore his ACL last year at Florida. Before he was at Florida, he was a highly touted, one of the most highly touted quarterback recruits that Wisconsin ever got. It just never really was there for him at Wisconsin, and it was okay at Florida before the injury. But ultimately, Mertz, I didn't love using the draft pick on him. I would have used it on a totally different position. Physically, he's got a better arm than what Kedon Slovis has, but right now, I know Kedon Slovis has two working legs. I don't know that about Graham Mertz. If Mertz can practice in training camp, he should have the opportunity and should have a path to not only playing a lot in the preseason games, but also beating out Kedon Slovis for that third quarterback in the organization role. Now, notice the way I said that, third quarterback in the organization role, because it's not third quarterback on the roster. I don't believe the Texans are keeping a third quarterback on the 53-man roster, but on the practice squad, certainly. And if you think about the progression, if they liked Mertz enough to use that draft pick on him, again, baffling to me, didn't understand it, would have drafted numerous other individuals, but if they liked Mertz enough to use that draft pick on him, perhaps he could be in the building, learn this year. Hopefully you never need him off of the practice squad, and then he's the new Davis Mills next year when Davis Mills moves on and takes a starting job somewhere or a better backup job or just wants a different crack at something. That's the long-term outcome for Mertz. I don't see any way, shape, or form where this player is affecting the 2025 season in any way. And that's not being mean. That's just being honest, and probably a good thing. You don't want Graham Mertz affecting the season in 2025. Hey, another backup linebacker here in Jamal Hill. The Texans drafting Hill late in the 2024 NFL draft, a safety that converted to linebacker at Oregon and played pretty well for the Ducks, quack, quack, and then just didn't really get on the field a ton for the Houston Texans. There were some special teams snaps, but he made the roster, he made the team, and he's going to have a chance to crack the back end of that linebacker room yet again for the Houston Texans. Same conversation with Jake Hansen. Don't know how you can really keep him and Hansen, how you can keep either of them if you like another young linebacker as a depth piece, or maybe they just lose out on the numbers game at linebacker because the team keeps a fullback or the team keeps an extra wide receiver or an extra defensive back. It's all what can you do for the Texans away from defense? How well do you do it? And if they have to play you on defense, what can you do? I don't know that I know the answer to that with Jamal Hill. I don't know that anybody really knows the answer because most of his defensive snaps are all from the preseason and training camp. It's not impossible for him to make the roster, but he certainly has a tall task to make the team, and he doesn't have the resume and the track record of success on an NFL roster as a backup roster guy that a guy like, say, Jake Hansen, who we just talked about, has. So long, tall climb onto this roster for Jamal Hill. Certainly a practice squad candidate if indeed he doesn't make the 53-man roster. The wheel brings us Ladarius Henderson, the offseason crush for everybody along the offensive line. Ladarius Henderson, another late-round draft pick in 2024 for the Houston Texans. And turns out Henderson was banged up when the Texans drafted him, got him in the building, found out he was even more banged up than they thought, and he missed all of last season. So Ladarius Henderson is essentially a rookie. He did not play at all last year, and this is his first crack at the NFL lifestyle as a guy that can get out on the field. And he was out there for rookie minicamp. He was out there for OTAs. He was out there for minicamp. Well, in OTAs and minicamp, he was way low on the depth chart if you're kind of guessing who's going where. So Ladarius Henderson has a nice long climb up the depth chart to try to make it on this offensive line. Now, Nick Caserio had plenty of nice things to say about him. D'Amico Ryans had plenty of nice things to say about him this past offseason, but it's a total unknown. He's got the same resume in the NFL as Eli Cox, who was an undrafted free agent this year, in that they've not played any NFL football. So no football under the belt for the guy like Ladarius Henderson, but he was a tackle that they're going to convert to a guard, and he was really successful in college at a couple of different spots, including being a big-time tackle for Michigan. And look, it's not easy to be a big-time starter for the Wolverines on that offensive line. In the Big Ten, they think highly of the O-line at Michigan. So there's a little something there. And hey, if you're preaching competition and the 5 best, Ladarius Henderson will have a pathway and a road to find himself an opportunity to maybe make the team, and if not, make the practice squad. This definitely feels like a player that if he's got something, he may need to be a practice squatter in 2025, and then in 2026, there might be a little something to Ladarius Henderson. Let's keep the wheel rolling. Let's get it going here. Let's fire through some of these names. Oh, baby. The linebacker-heavy episode keeps going. Christian Harris, or as my colleague in this fine conversation about the Houston Texans on YouTube, Landry Locker, has gotten me to start calling him Crypto Harris, okay? Because I don't totally know what crypto is, and I don't totally know what to make of Christian Harris. A year ago this time, Christian Harris was one of the most exciting players on the Houston Texans. He was a guy that was going to be a key piece of this defense. He had turned it on from that 2023 Tampa Bay Buccaneers game where I texted my friend and I said, gosh, Christian Harris just really has been disappointing. He hasn't really hasn't clicked or turned the corner or had his, the light switch flip or whatever. And literally from that moment, he crushed some poor Buccaneers offensive player, and he was off to the races. We all remember what he did in the playoffs against the Cleveland Browns as well. And then he just basically didn't play last year. An injury kept him from getting a start in training camp. Then he had the injury during training camp when he practiced for, a quarter of a training camp practice. Then he clearly had setbacks because he just, didn't play at all till the back end of the season when he was there. D'Amico Ryans mentioned it's just too far behind. Once he got out there, he didn't really look like the Christian Harris that we saw in 2023 either. So basically throw that out. And now when you look at Christian Harris, final year of his contract, a talented, but not super talented and way more talented than him linebacker room, and a make or break situation for a guy that, if healthy, is an incredibly unique linebacker that the Texans can go out there and utilize, and probably the best athlete at linebacker, if healthy. The entire conversation about Christian Harris is if healthy, because if he's healthy, put him on the field. Let him go be an athletic freak. Let him go chase down quarterbacks. Let him go cover tight ends and running backs out of the backfield. Let him go use that speed and agility and quickness and power and go be a weapon for D'Amico Ryans on defense. And if he's not healthy, well, shoot, what do you do? Well, that's probably why EJ Speed's here. It's probably why Nick Neiman's here. It's Christian Harris insurance with those guys, especially a guy like Speed, where the Texans spent a good amount of money, and he's played a good amount of football across his NFL career. So a little bit of insurance should Christian Harris not get it going. I do feel like there's a slight, tiny chance that if not healthy, he's not on the roster when 2025's 53-man gets here. And obviously another injury would be devastating to the opportunity to build any sort of momentum heading into this season. So Christian Harris got to be healthy. And if healthy, watch out. That is a weapon for D'Amico Ryans. If you need a weapon to take your fantasy football league at home to the next level, my friends at DrafKits are the best. DraftKits.co. Use the code CODY25 for your 10% discount. They're customizable, reusable draft boards. I have one in my league that I've had for 15 years. We got a big, beautiful, reusable draft board. All we have to do each year is just buy the new set of stickers that have the players, the team. And again, it is a reusable year after year draft board. We're going to use this for a long time, and it's customizable. You put the league loser in a precarious position as the background. Maybe you got AI to create you on a throne after you won last year, and you want that to be the background. There's so many different things you could do with it. They're the best. The guy that owns it is a Texans fan just like you. He's based here in the great state of Texas. They are awesome. Man, they do such a great job. They even have, if you don't want the big customizable ones, they've even got the just 1 year only use boards, and it's something for everybody to take their fantasy league to the next level. DraftKits.co, links in the description down below. Don't forget to use that code CODY25 to get your discount. The wheel spins on. The conversation keeps going. Let's see who we have next. Hey, how about a player that maybe initially doesn't have a huge use for this Houston Texans team, but might be one of the most important members of the Houston Texans this upcoming season? Ariante Ursary, the rookie tackle out of Minnesota. Now, here's what we know about Ariante Ursary and what the Texans think of him. They love him. They love him a lot. They love him so much that if you believe the reporting, and I certainly do, the Houston Texans tried to trade all the way up with the New England Patriots to draft Ariante Ursary early in the second round after they'd already gotten Jaden Higgins. Now, ultimately, they traded up a little bit and still got Ariante Ursary. He's a mountain of a man. Originally from Kansas City, went to Minnesota. He's big and he's nasty. And if the big fella gets his hands on you, you're probably not going anywhere. Now, he did deal with a little bit of trouble with some NFL speed in OTAs and minicamp, but it's a rookie. It's Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, Derek Barnett, and guys like that. And you can't be a full, true blue offensive lineman in OTAs and minicamp. Let's see what it looks like when the pads come on for Ariante Ursary. A well-thought-of prospect, and maybe not quite that first-round talent, but a type of player that is more pro-ready than a player a year ago the Texans drafted. When Blake Fisher was drafted, the conversation was more about, hey, he was a project. Maybe it takes a year before he's really ready to go. Ursary could play right away if the Texans need him. Now, he's only played left tackle really at Minnesota, so left tackle would be the ideal spot. Of course, Cam Robinson is there at left tackle. Ursary would have to beat him out. But Ursary could also play right tackle. He'd just have to beat out Blake Fisher to be the right tackle. Ultimately, I don't know that Ursary makes a ton of sense for the Texans in 2025. That was my big gripe with the investment in him. I felt like an interior offensive lineman might have been a better investment from a draft pick standpoint. I certainly see the vision for 2026 and beyond. He's one of your two tackles. He's hopefully a bookend tackle for you in 2026 and beyond. Not quite sure what 2025 holds. He could win the job right out of camp, and he's the starting left tackle or right tackle. He could have to come in due to injuries. He could just take over because somebody's not any good at their job, or maybe he's just the swing tackle in 2025 and has an opportunity to start in 2026. But here's what I know about Ariante Ursary. If they call upon him, there's going to be some moments where he's going to look really, really good, and the future is going to look bright. And then there's going to be some growing pains and maybe some speed that he has to deal with, but they got to take care of him if they put him in there. Maybe a little bit of help and have him in some good situations once he gets in there, just till he gets his feet wet, because I feel like once he sort of kind of figures out what the NFL life's all about, the big fella's going to be pretty nasty and going to be tough to get around for opposing defenders. And we'll just maybe here in 2025, but hopefully long-term from the moment he steps on the field, keep CJ Stroud upright. Wouldn't that be nice? Keeping CJ Stroud upright. Let's see what the wheel has for us here after the rookie at offensive tackle. How about another rookie? Third-round pick for the Houston Texans, Jalen Smith out of USC. Now, I didn't love the Jalen Smith draft pick. One, I felt like they could have drafted an offensive lineman at that spot. They could have drafted a different running back than the one they ultimately got in Woody Marks at that spot. They traded up 5 spots for it and dumped a 5th-round pick that they ultimately don't believe they had to do to go and get him. But I see the vision with how Jalen Smith, if he works out in 2025, I see why the Texans wanted to go and get him. He played inside and outside for the Trojans at USC, so he's got some versatility to him. And unfortunately for the Texans, due to the retirement of Ronald Darby, they've got a hole at cornerback 3 or backup outside corner, whatever you want to phrase it. And Jalen Smith should get a crack at being that cornerback 3 or backup outside corner for the Texans. He also could factor into a backup at the Jalen Petrie position and what Petrie does. Now, Smith would do it a little bit different. He wouldn't be as active around the line of scrimmage as Petrie, but he could cover maybe a little bit better than Petrie did last year, or just be used in place of Petrie should Petrie not be available, or need a little bit of a breather. When you're out there affecting things around the line of scrimmage like Petrie does, you might need a little bit of a, hey, give me a rest here for a play. Boom, insert Jalen Smith there. Most draft prognosticators had him as a 5th rounder, 6th rounder. Of course, the Texans take him in the 3rd round. Doesn't matter where you take him if he turns out to be a solid player and a player that you can utilize. And as a 3rd round pick, it's not out of the question to just ask him to be a contributor on the 2 deep. Go out there and make some plays when called upon because you're a part of the 2 deep. Plus, right off the bat, use him as a special teams player because he's going to be in the defensive back depth chart of this team. Frankly, I hope we never see him at outside corner because that means Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley did a great job and stayed healthy. But if you do, there's worse spots you could be in than putting Jalen Smith, the rookie out of USC, out there at cornerback. Let's keep the wheel moving. Let's keep it going. We got to get through this entire wheel before training camp gets here. So let's keep it going. Hey, how about Braxton Berrios, the kick returner, punt returner, special teams ace, formerly of the Miami Dolphins and New York Jets. Now, Berrios recovering from a knee injury that he suffered in Miami last year, and OTAs and minicamp was working out over on the side. He's going to need to be ready for training camp to make this roster. Berrios, not the most productive offensive player, but of course, at one point in his career, he was a all-pro as a special teamer. What does he have left? How has the change in kickoffs and special teams approaches from teams? And then, gosh, I just feel like punters are so good right now that even punt return is tougher than it ever has been. Can he affect the game enough on special teams that the Houston Texans keep him over another wide receiver? And should he get pressed into action on offense, can he give you enough on offense? Those are the 2 big questions the Texans have to answer with Braxton Berrios in training camp before they figure out if Braxton Berrios is going to be on the roster for the Houston Texans in 2025. Now, my gut feeling tells me they could gimmick it together with other players on special teams so you don't have to have a special teams only player like Braxton Berrios. My gut feeling tells me that between Christian Kirk and some of the defensive backs and Jalen Noel and maybe one of the running backs, that they could sort of figure some things out with kickoff and punt return that it might be tougher for Berrios. But let's see what Berrios can bring to the table in the special teams portions of training camp. We get to see him in minicamp. We get to see him in OTAs, and you'll probably see him a lot in the preseason as well. This is a guy that's in a dogfight for a roster spot, and he has to go out there and has to just prove his worth, test his mettle, and prove that he is worthy of that special teams forward spot on the 53-man roster. You got to be able to do something on game day. The old Bill Parcells, what can you do for me on game day? Braxton Berrios, you got to be able to steal some of those hidden yards that we forget about on special teams sometimes if you're going to make the Houston Texans. Spin it again. Come on, let's keep it going here. What else you got for me, Wheel of Destiny? Tim Settle. Okay, Tim Settle. Let's talk about what? One of the surprises along the Texans defensive line. has in 2025. Settle was hurt all the training camp last year, but still made the team. And remember, they ended up with Tim Settle, settling for Settle. We all remember the puns from last offseason when they didn't get the initial defensive tackle they wanted in Eric Armstead. So they settled for Settle, got him on the roster, didn't see him a lot in training camp, and he made the roster. And then he was kind of quiet the first couple weeks. And then he really got going there. And Settle had a nice stretch, especially when the Texans were dealing with some issues along the defensive line, some injuries and guys getting banged up and beat up. And Settle found himself a nice little groove, and he had some plays, and he had a couple of sacks here and there. And then it kind of it didn't stay at that level. It was a little bit more up and down towards the back end of the season. It was pretty vocal ahead of the Kansas City game. Didn't look great in the Kansas City game. Was kind of mad that, he said this, and I don't know if he backed it up all the way, and Kansas City fans were giving him a hard time. And there's a role for Tim Settle here in 2025. I liked the potential. And again, another year in this defense, maybe a little bit better linebacker play, some better play next to him, some more consistent play next to him. And we could probably see Tim Settle in a nice, reliable role along that defensive tackle situation. There's also some veterans in here that are going to push, and some young guys that are going to push Settle. He's not quite the old guy, and he's not quite the young guy either. He's sort of in the middle. There's young guys, Keontae Hamilton, Junior Tafuna, and Tommy Togiai. They're going to push him, who are younger than him. There's old guys that maybe could get it locked down ahead of him, like Mario Edwards and Foley Fatukasi and Sheldon Rankin. So not a guaranteed spot for Tim Settle by any means when it comes to the defensive tackle room. So he's going to have a really good training camp. He's going to have to really carve out his spot. When you think about money, if one of these young guys who's a lot cheaper outplays Settle, you save a couple bucks moving on from Tim Settle. It's not ideal. You'd rather Settle just play really well. You liked what he saw last year. Maybe he can expand that from a few games to a whole season worth of games, or something closer to a season worth of games. But it's a precarious spot for Settle that I would look over my shoulder if I was Tim Settle, and I would make sure that I'm staying as close to those old guys that are maybe a little bit higher than him on the depth chart as he can, as he tries to make this roster. Heck, why not? One more. Let's go. Let's see what the Wheel of Destiny has for us here. Trent Brown is not who we're going to get. I was watching the wheel. We got Daniel Jackson here, undrafted free agent out of Minnesota, the other Golden Gopher on this team. Now, Jackson was a pretty productive player for the Golden Gophers. 800 receiving yards each of the last 2 seasons for Minnesota. That's pretty good for a team that's, kind of difficult to watch on offense. Now, what has Daniel Jackson got to do here for the Texans to find himself with a roster spot? Well, it can be tough to make the 53-man as an undrafted free agent at wide receiver. There's just so many bodies at wide receiver that have more experience than you, are more in tune with picking up NFL offenses, and know what to expect from the NFL level of play. But Jackson, if he goes out there, he's tough. Maybe he can help on the inside and the outside, show some versatility, does well in his special teams opportunities. And now you start to build a resume. You start to build a conversation in the coaching staff and in the room when they're talking about cutdowns. Like, yeah, we can't put DJ on the roster, but can we put him on the practice squad? Can we kind of maybe just keep this guy in the building and invest him in a little bit more? Maybe he's a player that we could rely on down the road in the future. That's what the practice squad is there for. Is he a guy that can give us good looks in practice as we get ready for all our opponents over the course of the season? That's what I'd look for if I was Daniel Jackson. I need to show up as much as I can. I need to make as many good plays as I can. And I remember specifically in minicamp, OTAs, he had a couple of nice plays over the middle, and there was a little bit more contact than you're supposed to have in minicamp and OTAs. Guys running into each other, and he looked like he had a vice grip on that thing. When the tackling gets here, if you go over the middle, you're tough. You win over the middle. You take that thump. You hold on to that football. Coaches will notice, and the coaches will find a way to keep a guy that they could use inside, outside, special teams, and then use on the practice squad to help give them good looks throughout the week. They'll find a way to keep that guy in the building, and if you stay in the building in 2025, you get a crack at 2026. If you get a crack at 2026, maybe you got an opportunity to make this roster if you're Daniel Jackson. You'll have an opportunity to win some great stuff. You fill out the Google form in the description down below. What do you make of this group of Texans that we talked about here on the video today? Let me know in the comment section down below. Ursary starting from day one, or he going to be a key later on in the season? Tim Settle on off the roster? Let me know in the comment section down below. On the way down there, thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Visit my friends over at DrafKits. Get you a customized draft board for your home draft, or your oh man, wouldn't this be great? Your boss, you get a goofy picture of your boss, and your work league has your boss on the draft board. You hang that sucker up in the office. Hey, you'll be the talk of the office. You might even get a raise out of it because the boss will think that's hilarious. There's no way that can hurt your career if you have a bad picture of your boss as the background of your draft board. Nobody would dislike that. They promote people like that. DraftKits.co. Help you get promoted. How about that? And, of course, enter the giveaway. Have a chance to win some of the fantastic stuff. The J.J. Watt bobblehead. Got some sports cards coming your way. Got some gift cards to some restaurants. Fun stuff headed your way. So you want to be in the raffle. Rules are in the raffle. Google form as well. So appreciate everybody for watching. Training camp, it's almost here. I can smell it when really I can feel it being outside, but I love it. I love being out there watching training camp, coming back here on YouTube, telling you all about it. Appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.